Hey everybody, it's Hussein Kabani, your favorite broker, and I'm back with another story of 2020. This year has been a very interesting year for tenants. They all just came out of the woodworks and oh man, some of these stories you can't even imagine or believe that they could actually happen. There's been a bunch of them. I'd like to take my top 3 and just kind of give you a quick highlight of what's going on over here. The first story I want to tell you guys about is something that happened towards the end of the year. I rented out this property for a client and basically this tenant approached me and said that, look, I'm having some financial issues, some family issues and whatnot, and I just, I want to be out of this lease. Can you help me out? We try to hold up the integrity of the lease and say, okay, well, you're gonna have to pay something to get out and whatnot. And look, at the end of the day, if you know the Landlord-Tenant Board Act really well, and especially during a pandemic, like a tenant has a lot of rights and it would be almost impossible for us to get this guy out. He can cause a bunch of damage and whatnot. I just told my clients, like, look, at the end of the day, I know you're not getting your complete 12 months lease. I think that would be a lot more dangerous than letting somebody stay in here. If the guy wants to leave, he's letting you have the last month rent, which he's prepaid for. Let's give him his security deposit and his rest of his checks back, and let's just get this guy out of here and we could release it, or you guys can sell it if that's something you guys are considering. We go through this whole process. At the last day, we're gonna go walk through, make sure everything looks okay. There is damage to the property that's been done. Prior to this, I had a contractor go in there and just quote us on a cracked cabinet. That definitely wasn't like that, and it was like $200 fixed jobs. At the end of it, there was a key deposit, which the landlords didn't want to give back to the tenant. The way that they approached it was that they got the tenant to come out of the property. They gave him the checks back. They ripped them up, gave him the checks back. Basically just told him, like, look, there's damage to the property and we're not going to give you the $200 back. For this guy, I guess the $200 is a big deal. Something happened and he really needed this $200 back. They kind of went back and forth for a little while. At the end of it, the landlord is saying, I'm not going to give you the money back. The past tenant is like, you got to give me the money back. At this point, the tenant goes to his car and makes a phone call, comes back, and he's like, all right, you don't want to give me my money back? Don't worry about it. There's going to be someone here in 20 minutes to take care of the situation. I'm like, wow, listen, are we going to get shot here for $200? This doesn't make any kind of sense. I don't want to be involved with this thing. But the threats kind of persisted and we really had no choice but to call the police at that point. Ended up calling the police. The police came on site. Long story very short, the police said, like, look, it's a landlord-tenant issue. We cannot tell somebody to give them back keys or give somebody back deposit. Ultimately, the owners and the landlord of the property asked for this person to be removed from the property, and that's ultimately what ended up happening. How this plays out in the future, I have no idea, but this is kind of where we are. That's one of the stories. Another story I can tell you guys about is that I didn't actually put together a lease, but I ended up helping these guys get tenants out of the property. They ended up using a realtor to rent out their property. In my opinion, the screening was done very poorly and they ended up with just bad tenants. They were damaging the property. Easily you could see there was a lot of damage to this property. They weren't paying rent. The person that was living in the house wasn't even mentioned on the lease. Everything was just a real mess up on who placed these people. Owners of the property actually did take these guys through Landlord-Tenant Board, found out that this wasn't the right person, paid their rent up to date, somehow got it up to date. And if you get your rent up to date, they're not going to force you to leave the property. They got it up to date to a certain point and then they stopped paying again and the property damage got worse and they just simply wouldn't move out of the property. I worked with the owner of the house to kind of approach the tenant and the tenant got someone else involved. Long story short, we went through a bunch of negotiations and they negotiated to say, okay, fine, like, they're going to leave in 2 months, but they're not going to pay the balance of the rent or the damages. We're responsible. I just told the owner of the house, I said, look, it sucks. It really sucks, but this is probably going to be the best situation to get these guys out of the house. What ends up happening is that these guys continue to say that they're going to look for a place, they're going to move out, and they're just dragging their feet about it. Finally, we saw some light that they were going to be able to get out and whatnot. They continue to drag their feet about it. Ultimately, what ended up happening was that we went to the house, looked like the place was pretty abandoned and there was nothing going on with it. Like they left a bunch of garbage and whatnot. We walked through the house, basically everything was gone and there was no word from the tenant. So we basically assumed the house was abandoned. We had a locksmith come and change the locks on this property. And then the tenant all of a sudden shows up and says, no, I've got to get my stuff and we're going to sleep here tonight and whatnot. And, we're just like, well, the locks are changed and you abandoned the property, so that's not happening. I don't know what this guy did. He did something to the garage door, opened it, and I looked at the owner of the house. I said, you locked that door, right? From the garage to the inside of the house. He's like, yeah. Well, sure enough, he didn't. Tenant opens the garage door, walks to the back door, opens the door, and basically just says, too bad for you guys. What I realized was that they really didn't want us hanging around the property and the neighbors knowing what's going on and whatnot. I actually saw this opportunity and I said, okay, well, you know what? We're not leaving. I actually had pizza ordered to the front of the house and we just stood around there and I knew the people on the street. So when people saw me on the street, they're asking, what are you doing? And I basically just explained to everybody that would listen to me on the street what was going on and how we're hanging out here waiting for these guys to leave. And you know what? We waited out there, I want to say 6 or 7 hours, but these guys moved all of their stuff out of that house. But it was a big disaster. where ultimately this ended up well. I actually helped lease out the place this time, and we got awesome tenants in there right now. Hopefully over the next year or so, they will be able to recover from what's already happened over here. It's a crappy story, but I think there is a good silver lining to the end of it. And now the most incredible thing, like you won't believe that this could actually happen in a country like this. It's incredible. I couldn't believe it. I had leased out a client's property, and what ended up happening was we signed a year lease. My clients were going to move to India. Long story short, it didn't pan out. My clients actually ended up renting a basement apartment. They were just going to wait for this lease to run out. We could give them 3 months notice for them to move out because that's all what the lease was, and especially because the family wanted it back for their own use. But we gave them more than enough time. I think we even gave them 6 months notice, and right away the tenant is complaining and saying, look, I don't have anywhere to go. My house is not ready yet. Let me stay until the house is ready. And I just basically explained to the tenant several times that, hey, you have a 1-year lease for the family's own use. They need to get back into your property. Sorry that your house is not ready, but you're gonna have to move out. Well, I kept following up. He said, I'm looking. Where we got to a pretty tight point in this process where he needed to get out of the house. He couldn't find a place. So I took it upon myself to say, okay, listen, I have a rental that's gonna come up. You seem like a decent enough guy. Let's go over there. Let's check out that place. If this works out for you, then you know what? I could talk to the owners and we could do a month to month and you won't be out of pocket. And within a kind of similar area, this should work out very well for you. Great. So he goes over there and then I follow up with him and I ask him like, what's up, man? Like, can we do this? Can we make this happen? So basically I follow up with him. He's basically saying like he's went over there. He's took a look at the property. It's not going to work for him because his furniture in his master bedroom won't fit in that master bedroom furniture. To me, this is unreal. Like, you have a notice that you have to move out of the place. We did nothing wrong. We gave him more than enough notice. We had a year lease. The family has a right to come back into their property. I've even gone out of my way to actually show him a place that will work for him. He wouldn't be financially burdened by it. It's within the same neighborhood, but his furniture doesn't fit in the room, so he doesn't want to take it. There's nothing much you can do. Unfortunately, at this point, with COVID going on, there was not a whole lot we can do. And what ended up having to happen is that the family that owned the house had to just kind of, in a lack of a better term, suck it up and stay in their basement apartment until this guy's house is ready for him to move out. These are some crazy tenant stories. This has never happened in places with lots of people and a lot of tenants, and this has never happened to us. So these are the 3 craziest tenant stories I've ever run across, and they all happen to happen in 2020. All right, guys, hope you guys enjoyed the story. If you guys have any questions about these, let me know. I'd love to know what you guys think. Comment below, like this story, share it with your friends. Until then, guys, remember one thing: get Cabani, get sold.
Sell it, sell it, sell it, sell it, sold. Sell it, sell it, sell it, sell it, sold. Sell it, sell it, sell it, sell it, sold. Sell it, sell it, sell it, sell it, sold.